I've been thinking about the novel For Whom the Bell Tolls quite a bit lately, and it's always been one of my favorite novels. Probably, when asked what my favorite novel is over the last 30 years, I would say that For Whom the Bell Tolls has probably been the most frequent answer I've given throughout that entire time. And there's a few other novels that I also put in high esteem, but For Whom the Bell Tolls has always been sort of right at the top of my list. And it's an interesting thing given today's political climate and the whole idea of Antifa. So, Antifa is, in today's world, roughly akin to a communist revolutionary party. I would say they don't even really fully dispute that. I mean, a lot of their tenets are directly Marxist, and their stated aim of anti fascist activities is pretty universally aligned with communism, Marxism. So we have this anti fascist, communist, Marxist leaning movement at the grassroots level in especially Western states and in the city that I live in Vancouver. It's a very left leaning populace. How does this current climate of political divisiveness coincide with the Franco era Spanish Civil War, the precursor to World War II, the testing grounds for some of the weaponry that they would have later employ in World War II was a proxy war between the communists and the fascists. Fascist aligned Franco forces, Russian backed communist uprising in the Spanish Civil War in the late 30s, mid to late 30s. This is the setting of For Whom the Bell Tolls. Robert Jordan, the main character, is prototypically an anti-fascist, right? They call themselves anti-fascists in the book. I don't think that they talk a lot about communism, but they had definitely like the goals, the commander of the forces that Robert Jordan meets up with at the beginning of the book before he dispatches for his mission is clearly a Russian communist. Interesting, because I would consider myself to be not aligned with Antifa in today's context, yet maybe it's also a function of having read the book when I was quite young in college. I think I read it in my first year of university, and most likely on my own, not as part of a course. As far as I can remember, I don't think I ever took a course that had For Whom the Bell Tolls in it. But Hemingway was like a very important voice of the 20th century, and having studied American and English literature, British literature, Canadian literature in the 20th century, as well as past eras, but I specialized in history in my minor in world history, 20th century world history. So I did a lot of, and I also studied political science and philosophy. Political science, we learned 20th century political science. We learned about all the different sort of inner workings of how fascism rose and communism, Marxism rose at a more primary text level. So I've never really considered myself a communist. Even in university, I wasn't a fascist. I didn't see myself as a fascist either, but I was much more conservative leaning, more fiscally conservative, more business minded. Even though I took humanities, I was always an entrepreneur. And even though I took humanities, I was also and continued to be a very avid computer scientist, for lack of a better word. I've always been using computers at a fairly high level, and I continue to do that in this day and age. How does that fit in with For Whom the Bell Tolls? It's an interesting thing because I think what appeals to me most about For Whom the Bell Tolls is not really the play between the communists and the fascists, because I think what the book most clearly shows is that on both sides of the equation, there's atrocities that are committed, there's a loss of humanity. And although Hemingway approaches it primarily from a secular sort of humanist perspective, there's a sense that the rebel band that he meets up with, that they are free. So they're in the mountains, they're free, they're freedom fighters more than anything. So I think it was more the freedom fighter aspect of the characters. And I never took offense to the anti-fascist sort of leaning when I read it early on, although I was well aware of the moral depravity and absolute abhorrent treatment of individuals that occurred under the Soviet regime, and particularly Stalin. I was not no lover of communists, but there was, like, I guess to some degree, as a young person, not coming from a wealthy family, a certain degree of classism that occurred amongst my friends that I went to university with. There definitely was like a little bit of a classist, like sort of us versus them, because we were poor. We weren't poverty stricken or anything like that, but we were definitely poor. I don't know how much clarity that brings, but that's an interesting idea about the idea of Antifa in For Whom the Bell Tolls, because as I say, it's one of my favorite novels of all time, but I'm certainly no lover of Antifa in today's manifestation. They're, to me, uneducated thugs that do the ideological brunt force dealings of leftist politicians and leftist ideologues that are trying to undermine the strength and cultural unity of our countries, the US and Canada, and also in England and all Western countries, actually. All Western democratic countries are being undermined by an appeal to some kind of common man appeal, but it's at the cost of institutions that are critical to maintaining freedom. And freedom is what was most appealing to me about Robert Jordan and the band of rebels that he stood beside and fought beside during the circumstances of For Whom the Bell Tolls. So, anyways, that's it. That's all I have for today. Thanks for tuning in. This is one of those philosophical sort of a review video.